Hello and welcome to the webinar. We are excited to have you here as part of our Pathlock Innovation Series today. Our session right now is titled Why Using Detailed User Analytics and Big Data Can Help You Understand and Empower Your Organization. Our presenter today is with Linklaters, and our presenters will be Richard Butt, SAP Team Leader Linklaters, and Isaac Kimmel, Product Manager at Pathlock, and they will introduce themselves in just a second.
Thank you very much, Stephanie, and hello everyone. This is Isaac Kimmel with Pathlock. Just in brief here to give a little bit of context for today's session. Today's focus and what Richard will be talking about is a solution that really provides transaction monitoring or the context of the SAP user history or activity tracking from the software solution perspective. And it can also help with other topics like if we look at the middle assets governance, kind of a silo or rectangle, the did-do aspect. So really looking at what the SAP users are actually doing in the system. This solution that Richard will be covering today is what we call a Pathlock SAP native solution. And what that means in brief, it's an SAP native solution, or you can think of it as an add-on that's been proven in many of the world's largest and most complex SAP environments. Leverages our decades of real-world experience in this space. And because it is simply an add-on to your SAP, for example, S4 system, it's extremely scalable with very quick installation and, of course, no new or additional hardware required. And with that, I will hand things off to Richard to really jump into the primary topic of today.
Welcome. My name's Richard Butt. I'm SAP Team Leader at Linklaters, and I'll be talking about Pathlock's Transaction Archive and SAP's Reader Access Logging and the integration thereof, and then also how Pathlock have integrated security audit logs. That's normally transactions SM19 and SM20, and how that's done. So a little bit about me and Linklaters. So I've been working for Linklaters for 26 years. I look after the finance systems, majority of that time, and we moved into SAP back in 2003 and were the first global law firm to run SAP. I myself started in SAP authorizations or security when the project went live, and then moved into a role of a CRM functional consultant. And then for the last 10 years, I've been a team leader looking after the sort of SAP basis and security team at Linklaters. So moving on, Transaction Archive. So Transaction Archive records user transaction history, and this information is really gold, hence the gold nuggets on the slide. We have now got 8 years of data, and we've used it for the following. We've been using it for tracking user activity and problem solving, security checks and compliance checks, raising alerts when a user activity causes us concern, which will be discussed in detail in this presentation. Use it as a training aid when user activity doesn't conform to normal activity or processes. Removed inappropriate or unused activities from the users. This data is invaluable to us and wish we could go back further. So this is a TA selection screen, and I'll be showing you first the fields that you need to enter in there to select the data. So we're selecting the user ID information, the summarized or the detailed view of the output, showing you changes. So that's highlighting here. We can highlight REL records, SAL records. So rail records, read access logging usage, cell records, that's security audit logs, web access, showing activities from the SAP system, and also terminal IDs, which is highlighted here, so we can select a particular terminal ID. But when we show this data, there's a job that sits behind TA, which has to run daily and records all the user activity in the system. And it's very important that this job runs, so you might want to monitor that job quite heavily to ensure that it does run. So these are the results of the summarized results from that selection. And here we're showing the terminal IDs. So quite important, this one. So from the terminal ID, you could see if someone else was using a different terminal ID when they're logging in. So you could highlight that, especially if you've got robots running in your system and someone else was using that ID from a different terminal ID. You can show web access here with the transaction code and transaction code text. And we can also show the interactions, so the number of times a particular transaction code was used in the selection criteria that you've used. You can also show the detailed results, and within the detailed results we can see more detail around the transactions and timings of those transactions and when they were used. We've got the transaction code here. We've also got the function code, the report or table name, and the function ID and function text. So what are we going to be using this data for? So one of the key things that I used this data for is adding a sensitive action alert. So you can highlight a row that you're interested in and click the button Add Sensitive Action. And when you do that, you get a pre-filled screen that has appeared on the screen, and that pre-fills it with the data source, the transaction code, the function code, the sensitivity. So the sensitivity, there's 4 levels here. There's critical, high, medium, and low related to sensitivities. So another report that we've used is the role efficiency report, and you use this role efficiency report for a particular role in the system, in your system, and then it will highlight those users that have been assigned that role. And then with that information, you can then bring details of the usage of transactions within that particular role, so an overall percentage, and then detailed individuals percentage going down here. Okay, so another report that we have used is the users unused roles report. So we're using here a detailed view of this, and we've used this in our SOD analysis, so segregation of duties, and we've used it to clean up roles or remove unused roles from users, and removing unused transactions within a role. And this report is really invaluable to us. So highlighted here, number of interactions again that a user has had on a particular role, and then you've got the actual role name and then the transaction code. Okay. So one thing that we have done with Pathlock's interaction with the system Audit Log, and this is you can use this. You can access the system audit log from SM19 and SM20. But this integration is really helpful so that you can actually see this example here is showing you when we've done raising alerts regarding a client opening. So quite key when audits happen that your auditors want to see why this has happened, so you can actually show alerts associated with it. So this is the selection screen again. We'll enter the username that we will tick the box sale records, and then we'll tick the box transactions related and run the report. And then we'll get a detailed user activity report, and within that report we'll highlight the row related to SCC4 transaction. Yeah, so there's the transaction codes you listed down here, and about the 6th row down you'll see SCC4 highlighted there. And also noted is after the SCC4 client opening session, there's a save as variant in the function text, which sort of shows you the period of time that the system was open for. So you highlight the row, you then hit the add sensitive action button as mentioned in the presentation before, and then we've added that alert. And then once we want to create an email alert to email us once the system is open, we go into configuration tab and then sensitive actions, highlight the actual alert which relates to SCC4 as shown here, and then hit the maintain alert group, and then another screen will appear which will allow you to enter the user IDs as shown here that will receive the emails. Okay, and then if someone opens the system, yeah, well, they will receive an email report as shown here, an email shown here, and it will actually show you that there's been a couple of insert steps and update steps when that client was opened. Okay, so we talked a little bit about security audit logs and how that's helped us with client opening. But what I wanted to do is to show you how important these security logs are when you want to track user activities for other processes within the system. So on the security audit log, you can actually, what I've highlighted here is the message IDs, and the message IDs are quite important because they can actually highlight people's transactions or processes in the system. I will highlight those a little bit further. Okay, so within those message IDs, there's something called the sale data collection filter. So you select those message IDs that you want to be tracked in the system. There's a whole list of them here, highlighted here. And then, so some important ones I would say are regarding this are AUY, which allows you to track people when they do any file downloads, and DU9, which will highlight any tables that have been accessed in the system, i.e. via SE16 or SM30. There's a full list of these message IDs, and Pathlock will assist you in getting those list of message IDs. Okay, so moving on, we'll talk about Pathlock's integration to reader access logging. So reader access logging is a tool that SAP have developed, and it allows you to monitor read access to sensitive data. So it does this by tracking the user when a user transfers sensitive fields, and then it records it in the read access database tables within your SAP database. It can be used for GDPR checks. It can be used on DIMPRO, Web DIMPRO, and RFCs and web services transactions. It records the username, date, and time, and any data that's entered on the screen, any fields that are selected from a report screen, and any field layout changes on a report screen. In the example on the next few slides, I will describe a scenario using KSB1 transaction, cost center reporting, and then how RHEL has recorded that information in the SAP database. But please note, this is only available from ECC 6, Enhancement Pack 6. So you need to be on this version or above to use this facility. So the scenario I'm going to talk about is about running a report KSB1, cost center reporting. And the user enters the cost center, the posting date to and from, and the layout of the report. And all these fields that are highlighted here will be logged in RHEL. So in this, here's the report that the user has run from KSB1. And the user then filters the personnel number as highlighted here from the report, and does a field changes the layout. Okay, so once it's stored all this information that you're tracking, it stores it in its own database tables, and you have to go through the RHEL transaction to actually view this data. And it highlights the records that were exposed with date and time, and then the user, and then also the records or the information that was pulled back, like the personnel numbers in the report. This is it's not the most user-friendly tool to use, should we say, and it can be quite tough to find the data within the system. So something that we asked or did a joint effort with Pathlock is that we asked them to integrate this with TA, and this is what Pathlock have done for us. So how does that work? So in the TA user history, there's a RHEL tick box on the selection screen, and then once you tick that, you can bring up this RHEL data for a particular user, highlighting the report that was used and the personnel numbers that came back. This is a real time saver, I would say, and saved us a lot of time when we're trying to sift through all that information from the RHEL recording. And of course, you can then add a sensitive action alert report, so you can highlight any of these RHEL recordings that you're interested in. So really powerful. Okay, so how do you record these sessions? So you do this by within the SRHEL manager, and you then highlight the fields that you want to record, as highlighted here: the cost center, the posting date, and the layout. And then on the left-hand side of the screen, it then puts the technical names related to those field values in the recording. And then once the user then does this process, it will be recorded into the RHEL database in the SAP system. Okay. So in summary then, we've highlighted in Transaction Archive the use of all this user history, which is tracking user activity, detailed and summary reviews of reports. You mentioned about this daily job that needs to be run to record all this information, and highlighted that that job is really important and it needs to be monitored. The role efficiency and the usage stats reports can be run to help you with your SOD analysis. You can track web and terminal IDs within the system, and as also mentioned, user unused reports helps you with reducing your risks to SOD analysis. We can also add these sensitive action alerts, so we can track one transaction codes going back to SCC4, read access login, where we've monitored that example with cost center reporting, and system audit log usage, where we've highlighted where you might be able to highlight file downloads or access to sensitive tables. So those sensitive actions allow you to track critical transactions, and you can set within the separation enforcer module. User stats can also be used for any new projects that you're doing within your SAP sandpit or development environment, and assist with building new roles. TA also integrates with other Pathlock modules, separations enforcers, as we just mentioned, which is on SOD controls, critical authorizations, sensitive action alerts can be raised. We've also used TA information for license management, LM, for usage stats, and to remove license users that have no longer used the system in a period of time. Emergency repair, so that's an elevated access for a period of time, so we can track that usage as well. Role certification, usage stats to remove unused roles for a particular user. Role management, to create or change roles based on user usage. Authorization help, used to provide security administrators the best role for the user based on their usage. Process auditor, we have used this module to highlight access to transactions that a user should not use, and alerts can be raised. So really powerful, I would say, transaction archive module, and must be a must for any SAP system. So integrations then, we've done read access logging, which is a SAP tool to monitor access to sensitive data. You can set up a recording, and with that recording you can see when users have accessed sensitive transactions, change field selections, change layout changes. This is accessed by the transaction SREL manager, but is only available from ECC 6 Enhancement Pack 6. The integration with TA and RHEL, we've worked with Pathlock on this integration, and this collaboration has been really useful. It's allowed us to build these sensitive action alerts to integrate with the RHEL database tables for a particular user activity. We can then display the RHEL record via TA, saving us time rather than going through the RHEL selection screen, which, as I've mentioned before, is very time consuming. And then we get those real-time alerts. That's the key for me when sensitive data is exposed. Okay, so what else have we done with Pathlock? As I've mentioned, these modules, before. We've got emergency repair. The emergency repair. So when you want elevated access, especially around month end or upgrades or support issues. Separations of forces, we've built critical authorizations to help us run quality checks and access to sensitive data. We can also run daily reports from separation of forces enforcer on people's access to SAP-all, debug access, or PFCG write access. We have expanded out to our finance team and built SOD reports for the accounts payable process for quarterly audits. Process Auditor, we've used this module to build audit controls to report access to non-production clients in your production system. That's highlighting high-level access. We've also built IT controls, which Pathlock have helped us with. These are standard ones that Pathlock have produced. So, i.e., first one is being user groups, and when we've highlighted where there might be blank user groups within your system, the SAP Star account where the default password is still being used in your system, but there are other pre-built IT controls which Pathlock will deliver as part of this module. License management, we've used license management for our annual SAP license return, and we've recently purchased AA, Authorization Architect, in preparation for our move to S/4HANA to assist us in our role review project. We have received positive feedback from our auditors about the Pathlock modules, especially TA and its recording of user activity, and the emergency repair, which has an approval mechanism within it, and it tracks user activity logs which the auditors approve of. So yeah, always pleasing to keep the auditors happy. And then lastly, Separation Enforcer, it has helped us with those IT audit reports which we can produce, that we are keeping track of our access to our systems. Especially, one example was SA38, when people's got access to run programs within our system. So lastly, I wanted to give you some key takeaways. So Transaction Archive, the data that it holds within it is gold. And though we've got 8 years of data, I wish we could go back further. And it is essential for your SOD projects. Sensitive action alerts allows you to build those real-time alerts reporting on user activity. The integration with system Audit Log and the use of message IDs to track user activity has been really useful. And we now can track people's access to sensitive tables and any downloads of data from your system. And then lastly, the integration with read access logging and the mimicking of user activity to see the data displayed on the user screen has been invaluable to us, and it does really help with any security concerns that you may have. I'd like to say thank you for listening to me, and